Hey all, what I'm going to do today is go through a super basic wheel throwing demo and kind of talk through the whole process. Pretty much as simple as it can get. We're just going to make kind of a medium-sized cereal bowl. What I'm going to have you guys do is come right back here behind me to get a first-person view of what I'm doing so you can apply that directly to what you're doing. All right, and then we'll talk about the process. All right, so this view is going to be great. You can see exactly what my hands are doing as you're throwing. What you aren't going to be able to see is what the rest of my body is doing, my elbows, all of that. So you're just going to have to really trust me as far as that goes and really listen well. So generally, I only throw with a few different tools. Mostly I use a wooden undercutting tool, a metal rib, and a sponge. So the first thing that we need to do when we go to start throwing is smack the clay on the wheel. I like to start with a kind of a cone-ish shape because we're going to start by coning the clay up and down. I like to make sure that my bottom is curved. That way when it hits the wheel, the bottom hits first, then it expands out. That way no air is trapped in it. We want to find the center of the wheel, so you can just turn on your wheel a little bit and find where it's no longer spinning or not spinning as fast. Or you can take a little bit of water and just draw a little circle on the wheel. Most people generally have the wheel going counterclockwise, which I would recommend. It means you have to do everything on the right side of the wheel when we get to having your hands on one side or the other. And that's what I would recommend doing, no matter if you're left-handed or right-handed. So I'm going to look at the center of the wheel, take my ball of clay, and smack it down hard right on center. If you're wicked far off, you can move it, but that'll be okay. So the first thing we're going to do is cone the clay out. But the way I like to do that is that I think of the wheel as a clock face. So 6 o'clock is back towards me, 12 o'clock is up here. The heel of my left hand is going to go at 8 o'clock, and the heel of my right hand, the very bottom of it, is going to go directly across from it at 2 o'clock. Whenever you're throwing on the wheel too, what you want to make sure is that your elbows are always down, really braced into you, on top of your legs pushing down and in, or really into your hips. That's going to keep you centered so your arms aren't moving around all over. That way that you can really control the clay. So I'm going to get my sponge full of water, wring out all over clay so everything's nice and wet. Make sure my hands are nice and wet too. At some point, if you keep practicing throwing, there's going to be a point where you want to limit your water use so your clay doesn't get too wet. That's not right at the beginning. So just make sure everything's sliding through your hands nice and easy. So heel of my left hand, again, just the backside is going to go at 8 o'clock. Right hand directly across from it at 2 o'clock. My elbow of my right arm is on my knee. Left arm's right inside of my leg. I'm going to push down and in. The clay can't go down, so it's going to go up. As that clay moves, I'm going to move my hands up the clay to the top to make a little cone shape. If you need to, you can do that a second time, get it nice and wet, and go from there. Everything's going nice and even. Try and touch all the clay nice and evenly all the way to the top. Once you get to the top, just hold your hands there for a second. Take both your hands away at the same time. You always want to take your hands away nice and gradually and slowly. If you're pushing, you jump away, it's always going to knock off your clay. So you want to keep them there and then take them away nice and slow. You can kind of see at the bottom that the clay is kind of bouncing around. What we want to do is either cut that or push that in so it's not off. When we bring the clay back down, it's going to fill this if it's not centered. So you can use a wooden rib to cut it away. You can use the back of your thumb, another tool. I just will often take my sponge and kind of push it in. So then we're going to go down. The way I like to go down is I take my left hand, put it right at the top of the clay. The left hand is going to be doing the most important work. It's going to be keeping the clay on center. Then I take my right hand and kind of karate chop next to the left to hold it there. My right hand is going to be pushing down and away from me, and my left hand is going to be pushing in to keep that clay on top. I'm going to make sure everything's nice and wet. Keep those hands together. Push away from me and down. As I'm coming down, as soon as I feel that the clay below my hands is starting to get off center, I'm going to hold them there for a second, stop, take both hands away, add a little bit of water, and come right back up. The closer you are to being centered, probably the less height you need out of your cone. So once I get up there, I'm going to push that clay in a little bit and then go down again. One thing to think about when you're going down is that if you feel like you have to push really hard, you're probably doing it wrong. If you just bend that clay over, it's going to want to just go down. It may not get perfectly centered, but it's going to want to go down and go down pretty easy. So we can incorporate that in. The other thing is that if as you cone up, your center is getting lower than the outside, you get this kind of volcano shape. That often happens. The reason that happens is when you're start with the top being flat, the outside is going to move more than the center, or even if the center is a little bit lower. So what you can do to counter that is just make sure the center is the highest point before you start coning back up. And then as soon as it gets flat again, make that the highest point and then go up a little bit further. All right, so left hand's on the side, right hand's on the top, pushing in with my left hand and then away from me with my right hand. You can kind of see my right hand's not right on the top of the clay, pushing down. I don't need to support this whole top, just one radius from the center out to the side is all I need because the wheel's spinning for me. And then I'm gonna keep coming down. As I'm coming down and the clay's staying centered, I'm just gonna keep it there right at the bottom, hold my hands once it gets wider than it's tall, and then take my hands away nice and gradually. So now I've got this nice centered piece of clay. I need to create an inside and an outside so that what I'm going to do is drop a hole in it. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. Some people like to use their thumbs. What I like to do, I'm going to make sure everything's nice and wet, is have my left hand on the side here and then take 2 fingers of my right hand, put them together, and then go down and in at an angle to create a deep V-shaped hole. What we don't want to do is go straight down because the clay will catch us and pull us in, create kind of a screw shape and knock the clay off center. So I want to go at an angle. If you kind of want to figure out way close to where center is, one way to do that is just have your fingers right on top, pushing down just a little bit, then slowly move them in towards center. Eventually you'll get that little point, that's right where center is, and you can push down and in right in front of it. If you're a little bit off, you're going to get this kind of screw shape that comes up. So you can go just right underneath that, cut that off, that's right where center is, and then push down and in at that angle. All the way down to you're about 1/4 inch or 1 centimeter from the bottom. You can measure with a needle tool, turn off your wheel, take your needle tool, poke it in and measure that thickness. I know that's about how thick I want it to be there. So then I'm going to pull out the bottom a little bit. You always want your inside shape to reflect what your outside shape is going to be. So right now our inside shape is like that. So we'd be making like a weird martini glass shape, which is 1, hard to do, and 2, not very attractive. So we want to pull this out so that we can make more of a flat bottom bowl shape. My left hand is going to be in a similar spot. It's going to be right here on the side, except I'm going to turn it so the heel of my hand is right against the back, and then I'm going to take my elbow and really brace it on the inside of my leg so that my bone structure is supporting the outside so it can't go anywhere. Then I'm going to take my right hand, put my fingers on the inside, and take my thumb and put it behind my left hand. And I'm going to take my fingers and just curl them back towards the heel of my left hand. Okay, let's get the water out of there so you can really see what's happening. I'm just going to pull that out so it's just a little bit bigger. You can kind of see the throwing lines in there. Those are okay. I can take my sponge and just really compress those out, starting from the center and working out to the right and back and forth. It's always a good idea to compress the bottom of your piece. It'll prevent some cracking later and make sure your clay's nice and stiff and supportive and all that stuff. Also at the top, you guys see I've got kind of a sharp edge. I'm going to take my sponge and just compress that a little bit to make it nice and soft there and smooth. So from here, I've got my pieces centered. I've got an inside and outside. What I'm going to do next is try to add some height, width, and then shape. We do that through the pulls. So this is really where you really have to make sure you're only working on the right side with the wheel going counterclockwise. It's a lot like playing an instrument like a guitar that 90% of people, maybe more, play with their left hand on the neck and strumming with their right hand. Same goes for wheel throwing. Most people throw with the wheel going counterclockwise and your hands both working on the right side, no matter if you're left-handed or right-handed. And I would totally recommend that we all do that anyway. There's going to be a learning curve for us all, no matter how we start. And this way, whenever you're taught by a new person, it's most likely that they're going to be throwing the same way that you are, so you don't have to flip everything. It means that if you ever teach someone, that you can teach them the way that they're probably going to learn. Just makes the whole process easier. There's going to be pros and cons to using your right hand and throwing this way, your left hand and or if you're right-handed and throwing this way, if you're left-handed and throwing this way. It's all going to come out in the wash. So it doesn't matter. So I would totally recommend we all throw this way. One thing that we do want to do though is my wheel is still going pretty quick. At this point, we have added a lot of water to the clay. There's both an inside and an outside, so we want to really slow down the wheel. I say about 30% speed so that we can really control the clay. With the wheel going that fast, as this clay gets thinner, it's going to really want to pull us out, and we want to be able to control the clay. We don't want the wheel to tell us where to go. We want to tell the clay where to go. So we're going to do the pull. So I'm going to add water all over so everything's nice and wet, clean up my bat, and clean up the inside. And how you want to hold your hands is that your hands are really locked together. So we'll tell the little kids to make butterflies with their hands, put the wings together, then curl the wings and bring your fingertips together to make kind of a crab claw. What you want to be doing is using the pads of your fingers. So you don't want to be using your fingertip. You don't want to be using the side of your finger. You want to be using this kind of angled part right here, just what we call the pads of your fingers. And you don't want to use like all of your fingers or anything. You want to limit the surface area that you can do. So I mostly just use my middle fingers with my other fingers there for support. And you can kind of see that's just right where I'm using it, right there. So how we do that is our hands are all locked together, left hand's on the inside, right hand's on the outside, working on our right side. You can kind of think that you're working like right between like 3 and 5 o'clock, and you're just going to start at the bottom and go straight up from there. I'm going to very gently pinch my fingers together. Once that clay moves, I'm going to leave my fingers that same distance apart and slowly raise them up to the top of the clay. Once I'm starting to get to the top, I'm going to go nice and slow, hold them right at the top, and take them both away at the same time. All right? And then after every pull, I like to do a few different things. One is I like to compress the rim. The way we do that is that one hand or some hands are going to be pinching on the sides. Normally when you pinch on the sides, that would make the clay go up. We're going to put a top on it so that it can't go up. That way, as that clay goes up, it's really just going to come back down and really compress. So finger on the top, fingers on the side compressing, and or pinching, and that's going to compress the clay. So that's going to make a pretty like right angled thing here. But we can also do that with a sponge. So bend the sponge around. So that's on either side. Pinch with my fingers to create a nice rounded rim. There's other tools that people use, chamois, there's plastic bags. Sometimes people use like paper towels. Whatever you want to do, that works great. The other thing that I like to do is really compress the side with a metal rib. When I have a flat side, I use the flat side of the rib. When I have a curved side, I use the curved side. I'm just going to start at the bottom, start with the corner of the rib, and work up, also pushing out with my left hand on the inside and compressing with that rib there. So you can see I'm not holding the rib and bringing it up. I'm touching with most of the rib. All of that clay that comes off is slip. It's going to be super wet. It's just going to get in the way. It's just adding like wetness and extra weight to the clay. So taking all that off, although it seems counterintuitive, it's going to make it so that we can make a bigger piece in the end. Oh, looks like I have something in my clay here. Wonder what that is. Looks like a little stick. Yep, little stick. We'll just compress that out again too. And then the last thing I like to do is undercut the bottom. I just like to use the back of my thumb, just create a little notch at the bottom. That makes it so that we can really get our fingers underneath the clay to lift it up. And so then once I do all those things, I add water. And it seems strange that you're going to do all those things every time, but really doing all those things after every pull is really going to make your clay stronger so you can really get it taller in the long run. All right, so then I'm going to do another pull. This is going to be a bowl. So I'm going to let it come out a little bit wider on me. If I want it to come out a little bit wider, I push a little bit more with my left hand than my right hand. Probably generally when you're making like tall, skinny pieces, if you push more with your right hand, you're going to get a vertical piece. So if I push kind of equally, that clay is going to start to come out. So I'm going to start at the bottom, pinch my fingers together, and then as I come up, make sure that wheel's not going too fast. I'm going to kind of let that clay come out into my right hand there. So I'm always working to get even walls. That's always the goal. We don't care if they're thick or thin, especially at first, we just want them even. So after I do that, I'm going to compress my top, get all the water, standing water out of the inside. We never want standing water. That's going to just make our pieces weaker. Undercut the bottom and compress with my rib. Doesn't matter the order you do these things in. You just really want to do them all. You can also, if you want to, compress the inside with that metal rib and take off that slip. That's probably unnecessary, but doesn't hurt. I'm gonna add a little water. I'm gonna do another pull for height and width. So pinch at the bottom, that wheel's going nice and slow, and then slowly move my hands up the piece, touching everywhere. You can kind of see that I'm moving my hands super slowly, always the goal. You can count to like 7, 1,000, but the bigger the piece, the longer it should take. You never want to go too fast. That's just going to knock your piece off. Get all that standing water out of the inside, compress the rim, undercut the bottom, compress the sides. Honestly, I do this every single time, and it really, really helps. Okay. So, I've done 3 pulls now. I'm going to really start to shape it. What you can really want to think about is finishing your pieces in as few pulls as possible. The more you touch the clay, the more that the clay is going to twist, which is going to make the clay weaker, and it's going to add water every time you touch the clay too. So if you can do more of the process in fewer pulls, that means you're going to be able to get bigger, thinner, nicer pieces in the long run. So when we go to shape the piece, we can do a bunch of different things. One is we can use a form on the outside to really push that clay into. You can do that with something stiff like a wooden rib, or you can do something curved like your metal rib and push out into that. You can just push from the inside a little bit with like a sponge or other ribs to create a little bit of a curve. I like to do my pulls with my fingers. So if my fingers are like this, so if we want to go straight, we kind of lay them straight up and down. But you can kind of think of it as driving a little race car. So if you want to go out, you kind of turn your hands out, and that clay is going to go out. You can turn them in, go in. It's also the pressure that you push. If you push more the out, it's going to go in and back out, and you can really kind of do all kinds of different shapes. So I'm going to do that a little bit. I'll probably make a funky little shape here so you can kind of see that. So I'm going to add water. I will very gently touch the surface of my piece to make sure it's nice and wet all the way through and that nowhere is sticking. Start at the bottom. Left hand on the inside, right hand on the top, going nice and slow. I'm going to start by going up, and then I'm going to push out with my left hand to get that clay moving out, and then I can come back in, up, and then I can push in with my right hand. In is always harder. Clay is more plastic than it's elastic. It wants to go out more than it wants to come back in. And then I can turn it back out to really bring that clay out. Right? And so you can kind of see, if I can pick this up, and look at the kind of profile view, what's going on there. All right? So you can kind of see how you can really change the shape. I'm going to go through and do another pull just to even this all out so I can kind of make it into more of a normal bowl. So I'm going to start at the bottom. And that's kind of the shape that you often want to go with, is that you make like kind of a backwards C shape that you just push at the bottom, work that clay out and up, and back in. Some people think of it as like a J, but just like this swooping curve. What clay doesn't have any is horizontal strength. So if you come out too wide, too fast, it's just going to collapse on you. So if you're coming out, you always want to make sure you're also going up. So you have like a nice angle, and then you have a nice curve all the way through. So then this piece is pretty much done. I'm just going to do some cleanup steps. I'm going to clean up my rim a little bit, get that water out, get all the water out of the inside. I'm going to clean up my bat. And then I'm going to undercut the bottom. The way I do that is that I hold my undercutting tool with the kind of sharp side up. I'm going to angle that edge towards me a little bit, and then take the back edge and angle that away. So what's going to happen is the clay is going to come in to this, or I'm going to bring this into the clay. It's going to catch it, and then it's going to move that clay out and away from the bowl. So start away from the clay with the wheel spinning there, and push that in to create just a little notch at the bottom. So there goes some clay. What that little notch is going to do is make it so when we put a wire underneath that we can pull it right out and underneath your piece and cut it off. So now that we're done here, I'm going to lift this up. I can take a look at my bowl. I left the throwing lines in there. I like that. The bottom is going to get more delicate later. We're going to trim that. I'll do a video on trimming some other time. And I'm going to just pull a wire right underneath it. Some people like to do it on the wheel head. I like to do it on a table. But that's the last thing that you do. Just really want to make sure that when you pull that wire underneath, you really push it straight down and pull straight across all the way, nice and quick. If you try to go too slow, it doesn't help you any. And if you have the wire off the bat, it doesn't help you any. Just kind of hold it nice and taut, push straight down and pull right underneath. Don't worry about it, just go for it. If it cuts off your bottom, it would have done it anyway, so you might as well just go for it. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll come back with some trimming videos and some more in-depth throwing videos later.